Hello, everyone. And now that we're moving into looking at World War II and how it started. So, if you think back to the Treaty of Versailles, we looked at to say that on your test, you had to identify to me as to why the Treaty of Versailles was fair or unfair. And all of you pretty much agreed that probably one of the most unfair things to happen was for Germany to take the complete blame for the war and then have to make those war reparation payments. So when Hitler comes into power and starts taking Germany over, what happens is that um, and starts to take Germany over. What happens is that the people of Germany are kind of welcoming him with open arms. He might have had a bit of a dictator philosophy, but oftentimes people feel as though when they're in that crisis mode, they need something to change. That strong direction and that very kind of narcissist dominating type of rule ends up being more productive because it's felt as though they can do something really fast and gather the support of people. Well, when we look at communism and fascism in Germany, that's what they felt made sense at the time. So when Hitler was walking into Germany just after the Depression, they're going through, actually, sorry, during the Depression, they're going through the Depression. They've already been, had all of their resources kind of taken to the extreme. There's absolutely nothing left. Somebody needs to come in and roll up their sleeves, and fascism was felt to be the way to do that. So, fascism was a totalitarian rule dominated by a single political party. It was severely restrictive to freedoms and rights of the citizens there. Order was maintained by secret police, terror, and imprisonment. So, while Hitler had fascist rule, Stalin had communist rule. And what is the difference between the two? Both communism and fascism are totalitarian in rule, but their beliefs are a little different. So the communist believes that there should be equity over the entire state, that whether you're a doctor, whether you're a person who works in a grocery store, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a teacher, everybody gets paid the same, and our division of resources is always equal. Everyone plays a role in society, but intrinsically, our role in a communist state means that we're supposed to be caring for one another. And it goes back to the communist theory that Marx introduced us to at the beginning of the 1900s, where he said, look, how is it fair that the king and queen get all the money and we as the workers have to do everything ourselves? So is that the theory of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat? You'll look to see that a communism will kind of stress the importance of reason and science and say that this is what makes most amount of sense. They blame the economic system. They said that capitalism is the enemy, and they believed in equality and that everybody should work together and cooperatively. And intellectuals were prided on, they were considered to be at the forefront. They were kind of replaced what religious advisors would do. So before the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, you would have priests and bishops kind of advise to government to say, this is what God wants you to do in your government. Well, that system kind of diminished, and then what rose instead was that intellect, especially in European countries, even within Eastern Europe itself. So they're more likely to kind of refer to somebody who has been considered a quote unquote intellectual, and things were really dramatically changing. So if you do remember that there was a Russian revolt that happened towards the end of World War One, everyone was kind of dispersed, very, very divided on their political views. So Russia was really divided. But on top of that, they were really poor economically. And the government took it upon themselves to take control back into the hands of the people and to divide out the resources that were left and try to help to take over the economy and improve it. And then there is Hitler. So Hitler was a fascist, and Hitler believed that industry should be owned by individuals and superiority of certain people. So whereas communism was very balanced in nature and everything was controlled and owned by the government, fascists would believe that there was a ruling class, and that ruling class was what held that totalitarian power that the government had. So The difference between the two is that this is a state where it is an organized system of rule through the government, with everyone being a government representative. Whereas here, you didn't necessarily have to be a part of the government, but as long as you were a part of the ruling class. And we know that Hitler basically preferred the Aryan race, and we're going to go over what Hitler was like and how the Holocaust started and all that kind of stuff. So Hitler felt as though the Aryans were of the supreme race, and they were the ones that had to kind of rule over society. He tried his best to blame all of failure on Jewish people, felt as though they came to Germany and they really destroyed a lot of the different they destroyed a lot of the society that they had and the economy that they built. They felt as though they had come into their land unwelcomed and uninvited. And when they come into that land unwelcome and uninvited and they take over the economy, so this was his way of turning around and saying, no, we're taking back the land because we rightfully own it. He felt as though the enemies were a burden and believed in private ownership and more capitalist in nature. They despised intellectuals but also feared them, just because his justifications and his ability to rule was so out of the ordinary and wasn't understood by many, didn't make sense. It was completely illogical. So he never wanted to work with the intellectuals. So many of them saw him come into power, knew and predicted that it would be a problem, and then they quickly left so that they wouldn't be burdened by it. And the ones that did stay, the intellectuals, were ones that supported his justifications of Jewish people being snakes and venoms. They helped to justify that because they wanted to be a part of that ruling class. So I put this document here for you to look at when you're comparing the difference between a communist ruler and a fascist ruler, so that we have a greater understanding of what was happening in the state of Eastern Europe just before the start of World War II.